let's go 3 picks from you, 2 picks from me. See if we can get another clean sweep.
So we had some success Friday night last week. So I'm going back to Friday night. Also, has Houston played like every Friday night? Do they just not play on Saturdays anymore? But I'm going back to Friday night and I'm kind of fading Houston again. It worked out last week. I'm doing it again. I'm taking the Houston Memphis over 57.5. Houston lost running back Alton McCaskill during the spring practice. Now they just lost to Sean Henry to ankle surgery. I think that's going to cause them to rely even more on Clayton Tune and Tank Dell. Tune's averaging 32 attempts per game passing right now, and I think that's probably going to go up, to be honest with you. He's got 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. 5 of those touchdowns have gone to Tank Dell. I don't think there's really a corner in the G5 that can slow down Tank Dell, so I'm not really worried about him getting his. And while this offense hasn't really been good, they're 31st in points per opportunity. So at least they finish drives when they get down there. Having a veteran quarterback, having a go-to receiver really helps with that. If they do rely on the passing game more, Memphis ranks 104th in the country in passing success rate. They're 93rd in EPA per play, and they're going to be without one of their starting cornerbacks. So I do think they'll be able to get plays through the air against Memphis. Meanwhile, we already know Memphis wants to throw the ball with Seth Hennigan. They're 4th in the conference in passing attempts per game. Hennigan's got 9 touchdowns, just 1 interception. Houston's defense has been really bad this season. They're 72nd against the pass, 103rd against the run, 117th in tackling. Their only thing they did well was get after the quarterback. They lost their pass rusher, their best pass rusher for the season, and they just lack experience in the secondary. So I think Hennigan's gonna be able to throw the ball on him. He's gonna have more time than you'd expect against the Houston team. Memphis runs super fast, so it's gonna challenge the Houston depth, and Houston's not much slower to be honest. So both these teams in the top 50 in finishing drives. Both these teams allow explosiveness. They run fast. If they're going to throw the ball, keep the ball in the air. Give me over 57.5 on Friday night.
Yeah, I think I'd play that all the way up to 62, to be honest, because really at this point in the season, totals when you're playing them over, if you have pace and you have explosiveness, those are the 2 elements that you need, and you have that in spades in this one. Speaking of overs, I'm going to go with the Conference USA over, a rematch of the Conference USA title game. Western Kentucky traveling to the Alamo Dome to take on UTSA.
The high one.
It's a high one, but you know what? I like it because let's talk pace. UTSA 6th nationally in plays per game. Western Kentucky, no slouch in that department, 27th. This is a matchup of 2 teams averaging over 500 yards per game. And also, I think we need to give a shout out to Clark Cephas and Zachary Franklin on UTSA. They are in the ballpark of being the first receiving trio in the history of NCAA football to all average over 100 yards per game. Clark and Cephas are already there, and Franklin averages 98.2 yards per game. So
and he's the best one.
And he's the best one. It's absolutely insane what's going on with the Roadrunners right now. And when you look at it, both teams, this pops to me. So UTSA 10th in total offense, 116th in total defense. When it comes to allowing plays of 30 yards or more, they're 127th nationally. Now, Western Kentucky, 12th in total offense, 48th in defense, but you don't have to do all that much of a deep dive to understand why they're 48th in total D. They played Austin Peay, they played Hawaii, they played Indiana, they played FIU, and they played Troy, who was on a backup quarterback who had transferred from Western Kentucky. So with all of that mixed in, I think they're at best probably 70s, 80s in terms of who they really are on defense. And I don't think they have any chance of slowing down Frank Harris. I mean, this was a UTSA team that, won 45-30 last week against Middle Tennessee, and they probably left points on the board. You had 3 interceptions from Frank Harris in that game, and including 1 in the red zone. So there could have been more points for the Roadrunners. The fact that both of these teams run essentially the same offensive system last year from a title game that went to 90, yes, 72.5 seems like a lot, but it's not too rich for my blood. I'm going over in this Conference USA battle. What are your thoughts on a very high number? I may be the highest on the board for the entire week, but I'm going over.
Yeah, anything starting with a 7 always scares me unless it's like, those old Texas Tech teams. But I don't hate it. I think about Frank Harris. I think if you're a college fantasy football player, this is an Austin Reed smash spot. I think this UTSA secondary is really bad. So yeah, it'll be a fun one. It's one of those things that you'll never feel like the over is safe, but it'll be a fun sweat that I don't hate one bit.
Yeah, I think these teams are capable of combining for 35 points in a quarter if everything goes right. So you're never really going to be out of it. You just hope for a hot start and efficiency in the red zone, because that's really what it comes down to with huge numbers. You can't be settling for field goals or turning it over, inside the 20.
Yeah, for my next play, I'm going with the team I actually almost took as my underline under my underdog, my money line underdog. But we don't ever win those, so I switched it to the I-5 so I can have a better shot at it. I know, I know how high I've been on this Georgia State team. I'm taking Georgia Southern +3. I've bet Georgia State all season. They finally get a win. Now I'm turning around and fading them. Look, this defense is horrible. Even in that win against Army, they allowed 354 rushing yards. Panthers defense is 114th in rushing success, 116th in pass success. They're 92nd in coverage, 120th in tackle. I mean, they're bad everywhere. Meanwhile, I love this Georgia Southern offense. I mean, seriously, Georgia Tech should hire Clay Helton, right? Because he's done in 5 games what Jeff Collins couldn't do in 4 years. I mean, to go from a triple option to this spread style scheme and have it work so quickly has been remarkable what Clay Helton has done there. That until last year, they ranked top 6th in the country in rushing rate in every single year since 2014. Now they're 4th in the country in pass attempts per game with 47. They're just below Mississippi State. And this Eagles offense is 10th in the country in passing success rate, 17th in rushing success rate. I also want to give someone credit. Obviously, Zach Kittley got all the headlines and talk last season, especially by us for his Western Kentucky team. But Kittley was technically the co-offensive coordinator with Brian Ellis. Well, now Brian Ellis is the offensive coordinator for Georgia Southern, and he deserves a ton of credit, not only for what he helped do at Western Kentucky, but what he has immediately done with this Georgia Southern offense. I mean, Kyle Van Treese was like a who cares guy at Buffalo. He's averaging 315 yards per game. They got Derwin Burgess, Caleb Hood, Jeremy Singleton, all of them great on the outside, all pick up huge plays. They don't run the ball a ton, obviously, but when they do run it, Jalen White's averaging over 6 yards per carry. He's got 7 touchdowns on the year. And this offense is one of the best in the country, is the best in the country at preventing havoc. They play at a super high pace. I think this game is going to be a shootout. Both these teams play super fast. I think this is going to be kind of a back and forth game. And as crazy as it sounds, I trust Georgia Southern's offense more than Georgia State's at this point because I think they've been able to throw the ball better than Georgia State has. And, Granger's made some mistakes this year, and I think Ventrese, he has too as well. But I trust Georgia Southern's offense more. So in a game I think is going to be a shootout, give me 3 points in the battle in the Peach State.
Yeah, and signs of life from the Georgia Southern defense, because that was the fear in general with this Georgia Southern team. Was it fool's gold with their early success, including that upset in Nebraska? But they did a really nice job holding a Grayson McCall-led offense kind of at bay. Ends up being a shootout in the fourth quarter, and they give up that final touchdown. But I think overall, that's an encouraging sign because that's the best quarterback you're going to play for the entire year. So going into a game like this where, you're projecting it to be a shootout, I think they may be able to get off the field, on third or fourth down. So hopefully they can. In this spot, this may sound like deja vu, but we have the bounce house matchup between SMU and UCF. I'm going to play it again. For some reason, this number has come down. Hurricane Ian is long gone. Light winds, clear skies tonight at the bounce house. 62.5. I'm playing the over here, and I'll run through these notes very quickly because, we talked about it last week, but SMU 3rd in pace, UCF 8th in pace. SMU is going to throw the ball more than any team in the entire country. And when you look at Tanner Mordecai, we talked about him struggling against good teams and well-coached defenses. Even in a loss against Joe Gillespie defense, and I have great respect for Gillespie, everything he did at Tulsa, he still throws for 372 yards and they score 34 points. This UCF secondary is not as good as I think he's faced, in terms of the landscape of the entire season. But UCF, their strength is the front seven and not their secondary. So I think you're going to see some points. And then when UCF has the ball, man, the Gus Bus is rolling. 321 yards against FAU. He follows that up with 298 against a listless Georgia Tech team. And SMU, they can't get in the transfer portal in the middle of the season and fix this run defense. They're 118th against the run, 5.4 yards per carry. Seeing both teams run up tempo, both teams having success in different ways through the air and on the ground. I see this number blitzing past 62.5. And I also think it's going to be a kind of an electric energy in the bounce house to have a weird midweek game that's getting national publicity. And the fact that everything is now fine in Orlando weather-wise, there's no reason for me to throw the brakes on this over. Anything from your side of this in this AAC matchup that should, at least on paper, be a shootout?
I'm just curious if you hit this, do we technically get a win from last week and this week on the pod? Because you've given...
I can say from my own personal money management, I've done the only thing that you can do in this situation, which is double bet. I had one bet voided, but I am putting 2 units on this play instead of just one. So yeah, I think it should count for week 5 and week 6.
Since this is obviously the podcast is going to come out later this afternoon, everyone's going to bet this game. Let's stick on here for a second because I've actually been going back and forth struggling if I want to bet the over or if I want to bet UCF minus 2.5. Because I agree with you. I think the bounce house is going to be rocking. Weird Wednesday night, and I think that UCF can run it down SMU's throat. The question is, do they have enough to stop Tanner Mordecai in this passing attack? So obviously you prefer the over, but what are your thoughts on laying the 2.5 with the Knights as well?
So UCF's pretty average in all the passing metrics, 30s or 40s, but they're 35th in sack rate. And that's why I would lean UCF in this game, because Tanner Mordecai, it's a tale of 2 quarterbacks. When they keep him upright and his jersey clean, he picks teams apart. It doesn't matter if it's this season or last season, but when he's under duress, as he was against TCU, throws 2 picks. So that's the question. If you believe in the UCF pass rush, which I kind of lean in that direction, then I think it's a smart play. Maybe parlay them together.
All right, I'll jump in quick to my last play. I'm fading Middle Tennessee again. It worked last week. I'm going back to it. I'm taking UAB minus 9.5. Middle Tennessee gave up 590 yards to UTSA. Roadrunners averaged 7.2 yards per play, 167 on the ground, 423 through the air. UAB is 8th in the country in rushing rate. They average 220 yards per game, 5.5 yards per carry. Dwayne McBride is an absolute beast. He leads the country with 173.7 yards per game. He has 6 touchdowns in 3 games. He's averaging 7 yards per carry. He's averaging more than 5 yards after contact per carry. He is an absolute monster. And, quarterback Dylan Hopkins hasn't really been asked to do much all year. He's averaging just 18 attempts per game, but he's completing almost 70% of his passes. He's averaging 9.1 yards per attempt, which I love to see that from a quarterback who doesn't throw much. And if they did want to open it up a little bit, this Middle Tennessee defense is a pretty good one to do it against. UAB's defense, on the other hand, has been really good against the pass. They're 38th in success rate. They're 7th in coverage grade. Their secondary is sick. And Middle Tennessee throws the ball at one of the highest rates in the league. So they have 204 yards. 204 yards is the most that UAB has allowed passing all season. They have 9 interceptions while allowing just 2 passing touchdowns. So I don't expect Middle Tennessee to be able to throw the ball all over the yard against them. And while, the Blazers are coming off a weird loss at Rice where they outgained them 356 to 209, I like the Blazers to bounce back here. UAB is like sneaky one of the best home teams in college football. They're 2-0 against the spread and straight up at home this year, 0-2 in both on the road. Since 2017, if you take out the COVID season where there was no fans, and I don't count that, UAB is 19-5-1 against the spread at home. In conference games over that stretch, they're 12-3 against the spread at home. And that goes, that's Legion Field and Protective Stadium. So the Blazers have just been dominant in Birmingham. So I'm going to go ahead. Like I said, I still don't think Middle Tennessee is any good. I'm going to lay the 9.5 against UAB. I think they bounce back at home here.
I think this would be close to 14 if they weren't snake bit in that game against Liberty. They lose by a touchdown. They lost 4 fumbles in that game. And Rice. So I agree with you. I think you're still getting value on a team that is not only well.
There's also still the Middle Tennessee beat Miami. It's like, okay, Miami sucks.
Yeah, I mean, they also had they were averaging like 30 yards per completion. I mean, that game was just out of hand in terms of a nuclear absurdity statistically. So yeah, I agree. I think that's still baked into this number a little bit to get it under that key number of 10. I think is packed with value. So why not go with a Blazer team that may be laying in the weeds ready for a nice run here in Conference USA?